You did not arrive here by accident, and before your mind tries to scroll away, before distraction pulls you in another direction, I need you to pause and understand this clearly. If you leave now, you will miss something that will not circle back for you later. Not because it is being taken from you, but because moments like this only open when alignment meets timing. And right now, both are converging. This is a precise moment, measured intentional, and orchestrated far beyond what you can see on the surface. And the very fact that you are hearing these words means something inside you was already stirred before you even pressed play. You are not one of many stumbling upon random content. You are someone being addressed directly, someone whose spirit was already leaning forward, even if your mind didn't yet understand why. There is a quiet urgency in this moment. Not loud, not dramatic, not forcing itself upon you, but firm, steady, and unmistakable once you recognize it. Like a hand resting on your shoulder, saying, "Now, pay attention. This matters." Divine timing rarely announces itself with noise. It arrives subtly slipping into ordinary moments, asking for discernment instead of excitement, awareness instead of impulse. And that is why so many miss it, because they are waiting for thunder when God is speaking through stillness. Right now, something has already begun to shift beneath the surface of your life. Not tomorrow, not someday in the distance, but already in motion, quietly, rearranging paths, dissolving delays, loosening what has been stuck, and preparing to move you from waiting into alignment. You may feel it as a subtle pressure in your chest, a tightening and releasing at the same time, an inner stirring that doesn't come from fear, but from recognition, as if something long dormant is waking up and stretching after a long sleep. This is awareness rising, not anxiety, not imagination, not coincidence, but the moment when your spirit realizes it is being addressed directly. You might not be able to explain it in words, but you can feel it, that sense that something important is happening, even though nothing around you has visibly changed yet. That is how divine moments often arrive quietly, but decisively, requiring your presence more than your understanding. Understand this: you did not arrive early, and you did not arrive late. You arrived exactly when you were meant to, because everything that came before this moment, every delay, every closed door, every season of confusion or silence, was positioning you to be able to receive what is unfolding now, without being overwhelmed or unprepared. Had this moment come earlier, you might not have recognized it. Had it come later, you might have grown too weary to respond. But now, right here, right as you are, is the intersection point where preparation meets opportunity, where divine orchestration meets human awareness. This is why distraction is dangerous right now. Not because you will be punished for it, but because distraction causes loss by default, not by force. When attention drifts, alignment slips quietly away, and the window closes without announcement. This moment does not shout, because it does not need to. It carries weight on its own, and weight does not need volume to be felt. You may be tempted to multitask, to half listen, to treat this as background noise, but that would be a mistake, because what is being released in this moment is subtle, layered, and precise, requiring your full presence to recognize and receive. There is something being confirmed right now, something you have been questioning, something you have been waiting for clarity on. And the answer is not arriving as a sentence, but as a knowing. A deep internal settling that says, yes, this is the direction. This is the moment. This is real. You are standing at the edge of a shift, not one that will uproot everything violently, but one that will realign what already exists in your life, causing things to fall into place with an ease that surprises you later. But ease does not mean insignificance. Often, the most significant changes happen quietly internally, long before they manifest outwardly. That is why this moment is critical, even though it feels calm, why it is decisive even though it feels gentle. God often moves this way, not to overwhelm you, but to invite your consent, to see if you will recognize His timing without being forced. If you will choose awareness over distraction, stillness over noise, presence over impulse. Right now, you are being given an opportunity to align consciously with something that has already been set in motion on your behalf. And alignment requires participation, not effort, attention, not striving. Stay here, not because you are afraid of missing out, but because something within you already knows this is where you are meant to be, in this exact moment, hearing these exact words, preparing for what comes next. This new morning is not like the ones before it. Something is about to land internally, not as noise, not as emotion, but as clarity. What once felt like endless waiting will begin to make sense, and areas of your life that felt stagnant will quietly start to move again. This is not the result of gradual growth or slow progress. This is divine interruption. When God interrupts, things shift without effort, and what could not be forced suddenly begins to flow. You may have grown accustomed to mornings that felt heavy, repetitive, or uncertain days that blended together with little distinction, where you carried questions without answers and effort without visible reward. But this morning carries a different weight, a different tone, even if nothing around you has visibly changed yet. There is a subtle internal adjustment happening now, like a key turning quietly in a lock. You stop checking because it never seemed to open before, and yet now, without warning, the resistance loosens. This is how divine interruption works. It does not always announce itself with spectacle, but it rearranges internal order, first restoring alignment before altering circumstances. You may notice that thoughts which once spiraled now settle more quickly. That confusion no longer grips you the way it used to. That something inside you feels steadier, clearer, less desperate to push, and more willing to trust. And this is not because you suddenly became stronger, but because timing has shifted. Timing is everything in the spiritual realm. And when the time is right, effort gives way to movement. Waiting begins to make sense, not because the pain of it disappears, but because its purpose becomes visible. You start to recognize that what felt like delay was actually containment, protection, preparation, shaping you internally, so that when movement came, it would not overwhelm you or lead you off course. Stagnation starts to move, not as chaos, but as order, like water, finally finding the channel that was carved quietly over time beneath the surface. You may have tried before to make things happen, to force clarity, to push doors open, to demand answers. And every time you did, resistance met you, not as punishment, but as mercy, because premature movement can damage what is meant to last. Now, however, the movement feels different. It feels natural, almost effortless, as if things are responding instead of resisting, aligning instead of opposing. And this is how you know this is not human momentum, but divine timing. Divine interruption does not rush you. It steadies you. It does not confuse you. It clarifies you. It does not exhaust you. It restores you. You may feel an unexpected calm settling over decisions that once caused anxiety, an inner knowing replacing overthinking, a sense that you no longer need to convince, chase, or prove anything to anyone, because what is meant to recognize you will do so without persuasion. This is the flow that begins when God interrupts patterns that were never meant to define your future. Understand this clearly. Gradual growth requires constant effort to maintain, but divine interruption carries its own sustaining power. What God initiates, He also supports. That is why things begin to move without strain, why clarity arrives without argument, why peace settles without explanation. You are not being asked to figure everything out right now. You are being asked to remain aware, present, and receptive because what is unfolding is layered, not rushed. And awareness determines what you will be able to receive next. It is easy to miss moments like this because they do not demand attention. They invite it. Distraction is subtle quiet, socially acceptable, and constant, and it dulls the senses just enough to cause you to overlook what is sacred because it feels ordinary. But this morning is not ordinary, even if it looks like one. Something is aligning between heaven and time, and you are standing at that intersection without needing to move anywhere physically. Heaven does not always open with light or sound. Sometimes it opens with understanding, with a deep internal recognition that says this is different, this matters, pay attention. You were not overlooked in the waiting. You were being selected through it. Selection often looks like isolation, like delay, like being passed over, because it removes distractions and attachments that would interfere with what you are meant to carry next. Now, as movement begins, it will not come as chaos, but as confirmation, not as pressure, but as permission. You may feel drawn to release things you once clung to, not out of fear, but out of clarity, recognizing that they no longer fit who you are becoming. You may notice that certain conversations, habits, or expectations lose their hold on you, not because you are forcing distance, but because alignment naturally creates separation from what is no longer compatible. This is not loss, this is refinement. Divine interruption refines before it expands, simplifies before it multiplies, aligns before it accelerates. Trust what is happening internally right now, even if you cannot explain it to anyone else. Not every shift needs to be announced. Some are meant to be protected until they are established. The flow you are entering requires stillness to recognize and wisdom to sustain. And that wisdom begins with honoring this moment for what it is. A turning point disguised as a morning. A breakthrough disguised as quiet. A divine interruption disguised as clarity. Stay aware. Stay present. Let the movement happen without forcing it. What begins now will not fade like past attempts, because this time it is not powered by your effort, but by alignment. And alignment always carries you exactly where you are meant to go. Spiritual moments are rarely missed because they are absent. They are missed because attention is divided. Distraction dulls awareness. And when awareness fades, reception stops. Right now, what you notice determines what you can receive. If your attention drifts, the moment passes unnoticed. Awareness is not passive. It is active alignment. This is why presence right now matters more than understanding. Many people believe they miss divine moments because God did not show up, because nothing dramatic happened, because there was no sign loud enough to interrupt their routine. But the truth is far quieter and far more sobering. The moment arrived, but their attention was elsewhere. The mind was busy replaying the past or rehearsing the future. The eyes were fixed on noise, comparison, urgency, and surface-level demands, and the heart was no longer fully present in the now. Divine moments do not compete with distraction. They withdraw in its presence. God does not force revelation on a divided mind. When attention is scattered, awareness becomes shallow, and shallow awareness cannot hold deep truth. This is why stillness has always been sacred, why silence has always been a doorway, why those who receive the most are often the ones who appear to be doing the least externally. They are not idle, they are attentive. They have learned that presence is a form of participation, that noticing is a form of agreement, that awareness itself is an act of faith. Right now, there is something available to you that cannot be stored, saved, or revisited later in the same way. It exists only in this window of alignment. And alignment requires your attention to be gathered, not scattered. The world trains you to fragment yourself, to split your focus across tasks, screens, conversations, worries, and expectations. And over time, this fragmentation becomes normal, even praised. But spiritually, fragmentation is costly. When attention is divided, intuition weakens discernment, dulls, and the subtle movements of God become easy to overlook. You may still believe, still pray, still hope, but you are no longer fully present, and presence is where reception happens. This is why understanding is secondary right now. Understanding comes later, after the moment has been received, after the seed has landed, after awareness has allowed something to settle internally. If you wait to understand everything before you give your attention, you will miss what was meant to be received first and understood later. God often gives clarity in layers, not all at once, and the first layer is almost always awareness. You sense before you see, you feel before you explain, you recognize before you analyze. That initial recognition is fragile, easily disrupted by distraction, easily dismissed by overthinking, easily overridden by noise. That is why presence matters more than explanation right now. You are being invited to notice, not to dissect, to stay, not to solve, to remain open, rather than mentally rushing ahead to conclusions. What you notice expands. What you ignore fades. This is a spiritual law, as consistent as gravity. When you notice peace, peace grows. When you notice clarity, clarity sharpens. When you notice resistance, resistance loosens its grip because it has been brought into awareness. But when you are distracted, everything becomes blurred, and blurred vision leads to missed timing. Timing is not just about when things happen. It is about when you are aware enough to receive them. Two people can be in the same moment, hearing the same words, encountering the same opportunity, and one will be changed while the other remains unaffected. Not because one was chosen and the other was not, but because one was present and the other was preoccupied. Presence is the gateway to alignment. Alignment is not something you force. It is something you allow by bringing your full attention into the now. Right now, awareness is being tested not by difficulty, but by subtlety. Nothing is screaming for your attention, and that is precisely why this moment matters. Quiet moments require maturity to recognize. Loud moments are obvious. Quiet ones are selective. They reveal who has learned to listen beneath the noise. Distraction does not always look like chaos. Often it looks like productivity, entertainment, scrolling, constant input, endless thinking. It feels harmless, even useful, but it slowly erodes your capacity to notice what is sacred, because it keeps you externally occupied while internally absent. When awareness fades, reception stops, not because God has withdrawn, but because the channel is no longer clear. Think of awareness as the lens through which divine movement becomes visible. When the lens is clouded by distraction, nothing disappears, but everything becomes harder to see. Right now, the lens is being cleaned, sharpened, adjusted, and your role is simply to keep it clear by choosing presence. This does not mean forcing focus or straining to concentrate. It means gently returning your attention whenever it wanders, choosing to stay with what you sense rather than escaping into noise. Presence is not rigid. It is receptive. It allows without grasping. It notices without judging. It stays without rushing. And in that staying, something begins to align internally. Something subtle but profound. Something that will later show up externally as clarity, direction, peace, or movement. Do not underestimate what is being offered right now, simply because it does not demand urgency through fear or pressure. This is a moment that asks for consent, not compliance, attention, not effort. The fact that you are here listening, sensing, noticing, means you are already participating. Stay present. Let awareness do its work. What you receive now will make sense later. And when it does, you will realize that the shift did not begin when circumstances changed, but when you chose to notice. You are standing at a meeting point between heaven and time where divine intention intersects with your present moment. You were not overlooked, delayed, or forgotten. You were selected, positioned, and prepared to arrive here exactly when you did. This moment is not random. It is confirmation that what is unfolding next has been assigned specifically to you. Everything in your life has been converging toward this point. Even the seasons that felt unproductive. Even the years that seemed to move without visible progress. Even the prayers that appeared to echo back in silence. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was late. What felt like delay was alignment unfolding beneath the surface, arranging circumstances, refining your inner world, and strengthening your capacity to carry what is about to be entrusted to you. Divine timing rarely feels comfortable while it is happening because it does not cater to impatience or surface understanding. It works in layers, quietly assembling what must be ready both within you and around you before the next step can be revealed. You are here now because those layers have reached a point of completion. This meeting point is not about spectacle. It is about precision. Heaven does not rush, and it does not miss. When something is appointed, it arrives exactly when it should not, a moment earlier, and not a moment later. Your arrival at this moment is evidence that you have been moving in alignment, even when you doubted yourself, even when you questioned your direction, even when you felt unsure whether you were making the right choices. Guidance does not always feel like certainty while it is happening. Often, it feels like quiet persistence, like continuing to move forward, without full clarity, like choosing integrity over convenience, faith over fear, patience over panic. Those choices positioned you here. This is why comparison no longer applies to you. Others may have moved faster, louder, or more visibly, but their path was not yours, and your timing was not meant to mirror theirs. What is unfolding now requires the exact version of you that exists today, shaped by everything you have lived through, strengthened by every setback, softened by every loss, clarified by every moment of surrender. Had this moment arrived earlier, you would not have been ready to recognize it or receive it fully. Had it arrived later, something essential would have been delayed unnecessarily. This is the balance point, the intersection where readiness meets assignment. At this meeting point, heaven does not overwhelm you with information. It sharpens your awareness. You may not receive a detailed map of what comes next, but you will receive enough clarity to take the next step with confidence. This is how divine guidance often works. It illuminates just enough of the path to keep you moving in trust, not control. Control demands full visibility. Trust moves with partial light. You are being asked to trust not because you are blind, but because you are aligned. Alignment creates momentum without force. When you are aligned, doors open without strain. Conversations shift naturally. Opportunities appear without manipulation, and resistance begins to dissolve. You may already be noticing subtle changes, a sense of calm where anxiety once lived, a clarity in decisions that used to feel confusing, a release from attachments that once felt heavy. These are not coincidences. They are indicators that alignment is taking root. Heaven responds to alignment more than effort. You do not have to prove your worth or earn what is next through exhaustion. What is assigned to you flows from who you are becoming, not from how hard you push. This is why preparation often looks like inner work rather than external achievement. Your heart has been refined. Your discernment sharpened, your priorities reordered. You no longer chase everything. You recognize what resonates. You no longer fear stillness. You understand its power. You no longer confuse noise with movement. You recognize that true shifts often begin quietly. At this meeting point, you are being invited to release the narrative that you were behind, that you missed something, that others were chosen while you were left waiting. That story does not belong to you anymore. It was never true, but it may have served a purpose in humbling you, grounding you, and teaching you to listen more deeply. Now, it is time to let it go. You were not waiting because you were unworthy. You were waiting because timing matters, and timing was working in your favor. What is coming next is not generic. It is tailored. It fits your gifts, your experiences, your sensitivity, your strength. It aligns with the way you think, the way you feel, the way you perceive the world. This is why it could not be rushed. Precision takes time. As you stand at this intersection, you may feel a mix of anticipation and calm excitement and steadiness. This balance is intentional. You are not being launched into chaos. You are being guided into clarity. The energy of this moment is not frantic. It is focused. It does not demand that you hurry. It asks that you stay present. Presence keeps you connected to guidance. When you stay present, you notice the subtle confirmations, the gentle nudges, the inner knowing that guides your steps. These are not vague feelings. They are communication. Heaven speaks most clearly to those who are listening without urgency, moving without fear, trusting without needing constant reassurance. You are being trusted with something meaningful because you have shown that you can hold it with humility, responsibility, and awareness. This is not about elevation for the sake of status. It is about alignment for the sake of purpose. What you are stepping into will serve not only you, but others as well. Your clarity will bring clarity. Your steadiness will bring peace. Your presence will create space for others to feel safe, seen, and understood. This is how purpose often expresses itself, not through grand gestures alone, but through consistent, grounded impact. As this moment settles within you, allow yourself to receive the truth of it without resistance. You do not need to analyze it away or minimize it to feel comfortable. You can acknowledge that you were chosen without ego and without guilt. Selection is not superiority, it is responsibility. It means you are being invited to show up fully, to act with integrity, to stay aligned, even when it would be easier to drift. You have already been doing this more than you realize. This moment simply brings it into focus. From here, things will begin to unfold with greater coherence. Pieces that once felt disconnected will start to make sense together. Conversations will confirm what you have been sensing. Decisions will feel lighter. You will still face challenges, but they will no longer feel like obstacles meant to stop you. They will feel like adjustments meant to guide you. This is the difference alignment makes. It does not remove difficulty, but it removes confusion. As you move forward from this meeting point, carry this knowing with you. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are exactly where you need to be, exactly when you need to be there. What unfolds next will reveal itself step by step, moment by moment, through awareness, trust, and continued presence. Stay attentive. Stay grounded. Stay open. This intersection is not the end of your journey. It is the place where direction becomes clear and movement becomes purposeful. Heaven has met you here for a reason, and that reason will continue to unfold as long as you remain aligned with the moment you are in now. Waiting wounds and long seasons of silence were never signs of absence. They were formation. Every moment you thought nothing was happening, something essential was being built within you. Your scars were not marks of disqualification. They were training. They taught you discernment, endurance, and humility. God has never responded to perfection because perfection creates performance. God responds to surrender. When you released control, when you kept moving without full clarity, when you stayed faithful in obscurity, formation was taking place. You were not being delayed. You were being prepared. Preparation rarely feels purposeful while it is happening because it works beneath the surface, shaping foundations rather than outcomes. While you waited, your inner structure was being reinforced. While you endured wounds, your capacity to carry responsibility was expanding. While silence stretched on your sensitivity to truth was being refined. These seasons were not empty pauses in your story. They were the forge where strength was tempered and identity clarified. What you call waiting was the slow alignment of timing, character, and calling. What you call wounds were lessons in boundaries, wisdom, and compassion. What you call silence was the space where your dependence shifted from external validation to inner knowing. Many people rush past this stage because it feels uncomfortable and unrewarding. They try to escape it by forcing outcomes, chasing affirmation, or numbing the ache of not knowing. You stayed. Even when you questioned yourself, even when doubt whispered that you were forgotten, you stayed. That choice mattered more than you realize. Staying kept you available for shaping. Staying kept you teachable. Staying kept your heart open enough to be molded rather than hardened. In the quiet, you learned how to listen without needing immediate answers. In the pain, you learned how to stand without applause. In the uncertainty, you learned how to move forward without guarantees. These are not small skills. They are the marks of someone trusted with weight. Formation does not aim to make you impressive. It aims to make you stable. Stability is what allows purpose to last. Without it, calling collapses under pressure. This is why the process took time. This is why shortcuts were closed. This is why certain doors never opened, no matter how much you prayed for them. Those paths would have given you speed without substance exposure, without grounding influence, without wisdom. God did not withhold them to punish you. He withheld them to protect you. The wounds you carry now did not weaken you the way you feared they would. They stripped away illusions. They removed false confidence. They taught you where your limits were and where grace had to meet you. You learned what breaks you and what builds you. You learned which battles drain you and which ones awaken you. You learned the difference between being needed and being chosen. These lessons cannot be learned in comfort. They are learned in the tension between hope and disappointment, faith and fatigue, promise and delay. Humility grew there not as self-diminishment, but as accuracy. You learned who you are and who you are not. You learned what you can control and what you must release. That release was surrender. And surrender is the language God responds to. Surrender is not giving up. It is aligning. It is the moment you stop trying to manage outcomes and start trusting direction. When you surrendered, you did not become passive. You became precise. Your choices became quieter, but clearer. Your priorities sharpened. Your tolerance for distraction decreased. You stopped chasing what looked good and started listening for what felt true. This is formation at work. While others measured progress by visibility, you were being measured by readiness. While others rushed to be seen, you were being trained to see. Discernment grew slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day you realized you could sense what was off before it unfolded. Endurance grew, not as stubbornness, but as steady presence. You learned how to stay grounded when emotions surged, how to breathe through uncertainty, how to keep your integrity intact when compromise tempted you with relief. Humility grew, not as weakness, but as strength under control. You learned how to hold confidence without arrogance and conviction without aggression. These qualities are not accidental. They are the framework required for what comes next. The silence you endured recalibrated your inner world. It taught you to hear guidance without constant reassurance. It taught you to trust timing without needing explanation. It taught you that meaning does not always arrive with emotion, and that truth does not always announce itself loudly. This is why you no longer need constant signs to move forward. You recognize alignment when it appears. You recognize peace when it settles. You recognize resistance when something is not meant for you. That recognition was built in silence. Preparation often feels like loss, because it requires subtraction. Certain desires faded. Certain ambitions softened. Certain attachments loosened their grip. At the time, this felt like something was being taken from you. In reality, space was being made. Space for clarity. Space for authority. Space for a deeper sense of identity that does not depend on approval. Authority does not come from asserting yourself. It comes from knowing yourself. That knowing was formed here. When you look back, you may realize that the person you were at the beginning of this season could not have handled what you are now ready to carry. The pressure would have overwhelmed you. The responsibility would have distorted you. The exposure would have distracted you. Now, you are different. You are steadier. You are less reactive. You are more anchored. That change did not happen overnight, and it did not happen by accident. It happened because you allowed formation to do its work. You did not quit when progress was invisible. You did not abandon your values when reward was delayed. You did not close your heart when disappointment knocked repeatedly. Each time you stayed open, something within you strengthened. Each time you chose integrity over ease, alignment deepened. Each time you waited without becoming bitter, capacity expanded. Preparation is not glamorous, but it is powerful. It ensures that when movement begins, it is sustainable. It ensures that when clarity arrives, it is not overwhelming. It ensures that when opportunity opens, you do not lose yourself inside it. This is why you are here now, able to recognize the shift instead of being startled by it. You are not scrambling for identity. You are stepping from it. You are not grasping for direction. You are moving with it. You are not asking whether you are ready. Readiness has been quietly built into you. The season ahead will ask more of you, not because you are lacking, but because you are capable. What you carry now has weight, because it was formed, not rushed. Remember this when doubt tries to resurface. Remember this when impatience whispers that it took too long. Remember this when comparison tempts you to measure your path against someone else's timeline. Your formation was specific because your assignment is specific. You were prepared in ways that only you could be through experiences only you could endure to fulfill a purpose that requires exactly who you have become. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. Nothing was missing. The waiting shaped you. The wounds trained you. The silence aligned you. And now, preparation has reached its turning point, not because you forced it, but because you allowed it to complete its work within you. What is being ignited within you now is not emotional intensity or temporary motivation. It is fire, steady, authoritative, and undeniable. This fire does not rush, and it does not panic. It brings certainty where confusion once lived. Old limits begin to break, not by force, but by clarity. Fears lose their voice. Patterns that once governed your decisions begin to dissolve. This fire does not negotiate with doubt. It replaces it. You are no longer reacting from wounds, you are responding from alignment. This is the difference you may already be sensing within yourself. Where there was once hesitation, there is now a calm decisiveness. Where you once overthought every move, you now feel a quiet knowing guiding your steps. This fire does not scream for attention, and it does not need to prove itself. It simply burns consistent and contained, changing everything it touches from the inside out. It is not driven by urgency or desperation. It is grounded, intentional, and rooted in truth. That is why it feels different from anything you have experienced before. Emotional intensity rises and falls. Motivation flares and fades. But this fire remains. It does not depend on circumstances. It does not weaken when resistance appears. It strengthens you from within, giving you the ability to stand firm without becoming rigid, to move forward without becoming reckless. This is the fire of authority, not over others, but over yourself. Authority over old narratives that once defined you. Authority over fear-based reactions that used to dictate your choices. Authority over the inner chaos that once pulled you in too many directions at once. As this fire grows, you may notice that situations that once triggered you no longer have the same power. Conversations that once drained you now feel manageable or irrelevant. Temptations that once felt overwhelming lose their grip. This is not because life suddenly became easier, but because your internal center has shifted. You are no longer anchored to pain validation or survival. You are anchored to alignment. Alignment changes how you experience everything. When you are aligned, you do not need to defend yourself constantly. You do not need to explain your worth. You do not need to chase acceptance. The fire within you provides a stable sense of identity that cannot be shaken by opinion or circumstance. This is why old limits begin to fall away. They were upheld by fear, not truth. Once clarity enters, fear loses its authority. Limits that once felt immovable reveal themselves as assumptions you carried because you did not yet see beyond them. Now you see. Not everything at once, but enough to know that you are no longer confined to the same patterns of thought, behavior, or expectation. This fire sharpens discernment. You begin to recognize what aligns with you and what does not, without needing lengthy analysis. Your yes becomes clearer. Your no becomes firmer. You stop explaining yourself to people who are not meant to understand your direction. This is not arrogance. It is maturity. It is the natural result of clarity settling in your spirit. Patterns that once governed your decisions start to dissolve because they are no longer being fed. You no longer choose from fear of loss. You no longer cling to what feels familiar simply because it is known. You no longer repeat cycles out of habit. The fire burns through repetition and replaces it with intention. You begin to act from a deeper place, guided by wisdom rather than impulse. This shift may feel subtle at first, but its impact is profound. Over time, it changes the trajectory of your life. Fears lose their voice, not because they disappear completely, but because they no longer dominate your inner dialogue. You hear them, but you are not led by them. They become background noise rather than commands. The fire within you establishes a new center of gravity. Decisions are no longer made to avoid discomfort. They are made to honor truth. This is how alignment expresses itself in daily life. It simplifies what once felt complicated. It brings peace to choices that once felt heavy. You may still face uncertainty, but it no longer paralyzes you. Uncertainty becomes a space of trust rather than threat. This fire also brings a new relationship with your past. Old wounds no longer define your reactions. They no longer hijack your present moment. Instead of flaring up automatically, they surface as information reminders of where you have been, not instructions for where you must go. Healing does not mean forgetting what happened. It means no longer being controlled by it. The fire transforms pain into wisdom and memory into discernment. You stop reliving old battles in new situations. You stop projecting past harm onto present relationships. You respond with clarity rather than defense. This is a sign that alignment has taken root. As this fire continues to stabilize within you, you may notice that your pace changes. You are no longer in a hurry to arrive, yet you are no longer stuck. Your movement becomes steady and deliberate. You take fewer steps, but each one carries more weight. You invest your energy more wisely. You recognize that not every opportunity is an assignment, and not every open door is meant for you. This discernment protects your focus and preserves your strength. The fire teaches you when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain silent. Silence no longer feels like suppression. It feels like power under control. This inner authority also changes how others experience you. Your presence becomes grounded. Your words carry weight even when they are few. People may begin to respond to you differently, seeking your input, trusting your judgment, sensing stability where there was once uncertainty. This is not something you force or cultivate intentionally. It is a natural byproduct of alignment. When you are aligned, you become a point of reference for others who are still searching for their center. This does not elevate you above them. It positions you as someone who can stand firm without needing to dominate. The fire within you is not destructive. It is refining. It burns away excess distraction and fear, leaving behind what is essential. It reveals what truly matters and what can be released. You may find yourself letting go of roles, identities, or expectations that once felt important but no longer resonate. This release may feel strange at first, even uncomfortable, but it creates space for what is true to emerge. The fire does not strip you of who you are. It uncovers you. It reveals the version of you that was always there, waiting beneath layers of adaptation and survival. As this process continues, you will notice that clarity becomes your default state, rather than a fleeting experience. You trust yourself more, not because you believe you are flawless, but because you are aligned. Alignment breeds confidence without ego. It allows you to acknowledge your limitations without being defined by them. It gives you the courage to step into responsibility without being crushed by it. This is the fire's work. It prepares you not just to receive what is coming, but to steward it well. What lies ahead will require steadiness, discernment, and integrity. The fire within you is equipping you for that. It is not preparing you for chaos, but for impact. Impact that is sustainable, meaningful, and rooted in truth. You are stepping out of reaction and into response, out of survival and into purpose, out of confusion and into clarity. This fire will continue to guide you, not as a fleeting feeling, but as a constant presence, reminding you who you are, where you are going, and why you are here. Scripture confirms this pattern again and again. Gideon hid until courage rose within him. Ruth walked faithfully in obscurity until destiny met her obedience. Hannah endured years of silence before her prayer shifted history. Abraham waited through uncertainty until promise unfolded. None of them were activated from comfort. They were activated from surrender. And now, the same shift is happening within you. Survival mode is closing. Assignment is activating. Confusion gives way to clarity, and identity becomes solid. You no longer ask who you are. You begin to move as who you are. This transition may feel unfamiliar because it is not driven by pressure or fear the way survival once was. Survival keeps you alert, but fragmented constantly, scanning for threat, approval, or relief. Assignment gathers you into wholeness. It aligns your thoughts, emotions, and actions around purpose rather than protection. You may notice that the urgency you once carried is fading, replaced by a steadier sense of direction. This is not loss of passion. It is refinement of focus. Gideon did not step into leadership while hiding a fear. Courage had to rise within him first. That courage did not come from sudden confidence, but from surrendering his limited view of himself to God's calling. Ruth did not chase destiny. She honored obedience in the unseen. Her faithfulness in obscurity positioned her for favor that could not have been forced. Hannah's silence was not ignored. It was gathering weight. When her prayer finally broke through, it carried authority because it was born from surrender, not desperation. Abraham's waiting was not passive. It was formative. Each uncertain step taught him trust, and trust prepared him to carry promise without collapsing under its weight. These stories are not distant history. They are mirrors. They reveal how activation truly happens. It does not begin when circumstances become easy or when answers are complete. It begins when surrender replaces resistance and trust replaces control. That exchange is happening within you now. You are no longer bracing yourself against life. You are beginning to move with it. The questions that once consumed you are losing their grip, not because everything is answered, but because you no longer need certainty to move forward. Clarity is settling where confusion once lived, and that clarity is not loud. It is steady. It shows up as knowing which paths to release, which conversations to step back from, which opportunities to wait on, and which ones to step into without hesitation. Identity becomes solid in this stage because it is no longer built on reaction. You are not defining yourself by what hurt you, what delayed you, or what you lacked. You are defining yourself by alignment. That alignment brings coherence to your inner world. Decisions become simpler. Boundaries become clearer. Your energy is no longer scattered across endless concerns. It gathers around what matters. This is how assignment announces itself, not with spectacle, but with integration. You feel more like yourself than you have in a long time, not because you have changed into someone new, but because layers of survival have fallen away. Gideon had to stop hiding before he could lead. Ruth had to remain faithful before she could be elevated. Hannah had to pour out her heart before she could carry promise. Abraham had to walk before he could see. In each case, surrender preceded activation. The same pattern is unfolding in you. You are being asked to trust what has been built within you through waiting wounds and silence. Survival mode taught you resilience, but assignment requires trust. Survival sharpened your instincts. Assignment steadies your spirit. In survival, you reacted quickly because you had to. In assignment, you respond wisely because you can. This shift may feel quieter than you expected, but its effects are lasting. Your sense of self is no longer dependent on external validation. You no longer need constant reassurance to know you are on the right path. The need to prove yourself begins to dissolve, replaced by a desire to steward what has been entrusted to you. Stewardship is a sign of maturity. It means you recognize that what you carry is not just for you. It is meant to serve to guide, to bring clarity and stability into spaces that may still be chaotic. This is why identity must become solid before assignment fully unfolds. Without a grounded sense of who you are, purpose becomes overwhelming. With identity, secured purpose becomes energizing. You may still face challenges, but they no longer feel like threats to your worth. They feel like invitations to apply what you have learned. You approach them with discernment rather than fear. This is how confusion gives way to clarity. Not all at once, but consistently. Each step forward reinforces who you are becoming. Each aligned choice strengthens your confidence. Each moment of trust deepens your peace. Over time, this creates momentum that does not depend on external conditions. You move because you are aligned, not because you are pressured. The stories of Scripture remind you that activation often begins in obscurity. What looks like insignificance is often preparation. What feels like delay is often timing at work. What seems like silence is often God speaking in a way that reshapes your inner life, rather than your outer circumstances. As survival mode closes, you may feel a release of tension you carried for so long that it felt normal. Let that tension go. It is no longer needed. You are not being called to brace yourself. You are being called to stand. Standing requires confidence, but not arrogance. It requires humility, but not self-doubt. It requires trust in what has been formed within you. Identity becoming solid does not mean you have all the answers. It means you trust your alignment enough to take the next step without needing the whole picture. You no longer ask who you are because your actions are beginning to answer that question for you. You move with intention. You speak with clarity, You choose with discernment. These are the markers of activation. The same God who activated Gideon, Ruth, Hannah, and Abraham is at work in you, not repeating their stories, but applying the same principles to your life. Surrender has done its work. Formation has reached its turning point. Survival has fulfilled its role. Assignment is now unfolding step by step through clarity, confidence, and a settled sense of identity that allows you to move forward, not as someone searching, but as someone sent. There is spiritual weight carried in the early morning, and at dawn, a gravity that cannot be explained by routine or biology alone, because awakening in this hour is not driven by habit or discipline, but by command, an unseen summons that draws the spirit upward before the world begins to speak. And throughout Scripture, dawn is never casual or accidental. It is the hour when divine movement becomes visible, when heaven leans into time and direction, sharpens when instruction is released before resistance can form. And this is why stillness in these hours sharpens hearing in a way no other moment can. Because noise has not yet taken hold. Demands have not yet crowded the mind. Identities have not yet been performed, and the inner life is more receptive, more honest, more exposed to truth without defense. And in this quiet, the soul recognizes signals it would miss later. Subtle guidance that does not shout, but settles, clarity that does not argue, but confirms. And preparation in this space creates capacity, not by forcing readiness, but by allowing expansion from the inside out. Because what you can receive is not determined by effort, but by availability, by how open the internal landscape has been made. Through surrender, and stillness is not inactivity or delay. It is alignment before action, the calibration of direction before movement, the ordering of intention before execution. And this is why dawn awakening often feels weighty rather than emotional, because something is being adjusted internally before anything changes externally. And the spirit knows when it is being positioned, even if the mind cannot yet articulate why. And in these moments, you may feel drawn to sit rather than rush to listen, rather than speak to observe, rather than plan. Because the instruction released at dawn is not rushed, it is precise. It is meant to land cleanly without distortion. And when you honor this stillness, you begin to notice that your discernment sharpens throughout the day. Decisions feel less reactive. Clarity arrives without struggle. And this is not coincidence, but consequence, because alignment early determines accuracy. Later, and those who repeatedly awaken in this hour are often being trained to move by signal, rather than pressure, by timing, rather than urgency. And this training is subtle, but powerful, because it shifts the source of your action, from external demand to internal command. And as this continues, you begin to sense that your mornings are not your own, that something expects your attention before the world does. And this expectation is not burdensome, but grounding, because it anchors you before influence arrives. And over time, you realize that dawn is not merely a time of day, but a state of spiritual openness, a threshold where intention is set before distraction can dilute it. And this is why so many pivotal moments in Scripture unfold at first light, because dawn carries neutrality. It has not yet been claimed by chaos or conflict. And in this neutrality, truth can land without resistance. And as you learn to meet this hour with awareness rather than routine, you begin to recognize patterns forming in your life. Doors aligning without force, conversations unfolding with unexpected clarity, provision arriving without strain, not because you worked harder, but because you listened earlier. And this listening recalibrated your movement. And eventually, you understand that stillness was never about waiting for instruction to arrive. It was about making room so instruction could be received fully. And this is why those who honor dawn often move with unusual steadiness. Later, because they have already aligned before action was required. They have already heard before decisions were demanded, and the authority they carry does not come from volume or speed, but from precision, from having been instructed in quiet before being sent into noise. And as this becomes familiar, you stop questioning why you wake when others sleep, because you recognize that this hour has been assigned to you, that something is entrusted here, something that cannot be rushed, borrowed, or replicated at another time. And when you accept this assignment, the morning no longer feels early. It feels intentional, like stepping into a space already prepared, and in that space alignment occurs. Not as effort, but as surrender. Not as striving, but as consent. And from that consent, clarity flows, direction settles, and action later becomes effortless because it was already authorized in stillness. Before fruit multiplies, pruning must occur, because growth without discernment leads to overload and expansion. Without release leads to collapse. And this is why release always precedes expansion, not as loss, but as clearing, a necessary removal that makes room for what is meant to remain and what falls away. In this season is not being taken from you to diminish you, but to free you from carrying what no longer aligns with who you are becoming. Because habits, connections, and thought patterns that once felt necessary may no longer fit the shape of your future. And this discomfort is not punishment or rejection. It is positioning, the careful adjustment of your inner and outer environment, so that alignment can take root without interference, because alignment cannot coexist with excess. And excess is not always obvious clutter. It is often subtle attachments, familiar cycles, tolerated compromises, and inherited beliefs that quietly drain capacity while offering comfort. And pruning exposes these areas not to shame you, but to prepare you, because fruit that lasts requires strength beneath the surface, and strength is built when unnecessary weight is removed. And as you release what no longer serves your purpose, space is created not only for growth, but for growth that can be sustained. Growth that does not exhaust you. Growth that does not require constant maintenance to survive. And this is why pruning often feels restrictive at first, because it challenges what once made you feel secure. It asks you to trust that what remains is enough, and it confronts the fear that letting go will leave you lacking. But this fear is part of the process, because pruning reveals where identity was attached to things that were never meant to define you. And as those attachments loosen, freedom begins to emerge quietly, not as excitement, but as relief, because you are no longer managing what drains you. You are no longer negotiating with what distracts you. And this freedom produces fruit that is not fragile, but resilient, fruit that does not depend on constant validation or reinforcement. And as this continues, you may notice that certain relationships shift without conflict, certain routines dissolve without resistance, certain desires lose their urgency without explanation. And this is not apathy. It is discernment, maturing. It is clarity, refining your appetite, and what once felt essential now feels optional. What once demanded attention now feels unnecessary. And this shift is evidence that alignment is taking hold, because aligned lives simplify naturally, not through force, but through focus. And focus reveals what matters by making everything else quieter. And this quieting can feel unsettling at first, because it removes familiar noise. But in that silence, you begin to sense stability, forming an internal order that does not depend on circumstances. And this order supports expansion without chaos, because you are no longer expanding from fragmentation, but from wholeness. And wholeness can sustain increase without losing integrity. And this is why pruning is an act of care, not severity. because it protects future fruit from being choked by competing demands, and it preserves energy for what truly matters. And as you move through this season, you may feel moments of grief for what is leaving, even if you know it is necessary. And this grief is not weakness, it is honor, because it acknowledges that what is being released once served a purpose, and honoring that purpose allows you to let go without resentment. And when resentment is absent, release is clean and clean. Release creates clean space, and clean space invites clarity. And clarity invites confidence, and confidence allows you to move forward without hesitation. And this forward movement is not rushed. It is deliberate because pruning teaches patience. It teaches you to value depth over speed, quality over quantity, and sustainability over immediacy. And these values shape the kind of fruit you produce. Fruit that nourishes rather than impresses, fruit that remains rather than fades. And as this becomes evident, you realize that restriction was never the goal. Freedom was. But freedom that can hold weight. Freedom that can steward responsibility. Freedom that can expand without losing direction. And this is why pruning precedes multiplication. Because multiplication amplifies whatever is present, and God multiplies what is aligned, not what is cluttered. And alignment requires space. Intentional space created through release. And as you continue to release, you may feel lighter. Not because life is easier, but because you are no longer carrying what was never yours to hold. And this lightness creates momentum. Not forced momentum, but natural movement. Because when resistance is removed, growth flows. And this flow produces fruit that is not only visible, but impactful fruit that carries substance. Fruit that feeds others without depleting you. And this is the outcome of pruning. Not loss, but increase. Not restriction, but expansion. Not punishment, but preparation. And as you look back, you will recognize that what once felt like something being taken away was actually something being cleared, so that what was always meant to grow could finally take root and flourish without obstruction. When alignment is established internally, the external world begins to respond in ways that cannot be manufactured or forced, because alignment carries authority. That pressure never will. And this authority quietly rearranges environments, shifts atmospheres, and alters outcomes without announcing itself. So you may notice that spaces you once struggled in begin to feel lighter. Conversations that once felt tense begin to soften, and situations that resisted effort begin to open with ease. Not because circumstances suddenly became generous, but because you are now meeting them from the correct internal position. And when that position is right, the world adjusts naturally. People respond differently without knowing why. Resistance loses its grip. Misunderstandings dissolve before they escalate, and doors that once required exhausting effort begin to open with a simple step forward. And this is not luck or timing alone. It is favor responding to alignment. Because favor is attracted to order, and order begins within. And as this alignment stabilizes, you may find that provision accelerates in unexpected ways. Resources appear without strain, solutions arrive before problems fully form, and clarity replaces confusion, not gradually, but decisively. And this clarity does not make you reckless. It makes you precise, because you no longer move from urgency, but from instruction. And healing also begins to surface, not only physical, but emotional and relational, because alignment restores flow. Where stagnation once lived, and flow carries restoration with it. And this acceleration is not indulgence or reward meant to elevate comfort. It is assignment unfolding, because overflow is never given merely to make life easier. It is entrusted to expand, impact, to widen influence, to increase reach, without compromising integrity. And this is why overflow often arrives alongside responsibility, because what you receive is connected to what you are meant to steward. And stewardship requires stability, which is why alignment must come first. And as inner alignment becomes consistent rather than occasional, the external response becomes sustained rather than sporadic. And this consistency builds confidence, not arrogance, but grounded assurance, because you recognize patterns forming that confirm you are no longer moving alone or guessing blindly. And these confirmations are subtle but undeniable. A sense that timing is cooperating rather than resisting. That effort is producing results rather than exhaustion. And that your presence carries weight without needing to assert itself. And as this unfolds, you may realize that certain environments can no longer contain you. Not because you have outgrown them emotionally, but because alignment has shifted your frequency. And what once fit now feels restrictive. And this is not restlessness, it is readiness. And readiness attracts opportunity. Not random opportunity, but precise opportunity, aligned with purpose, and people who are meant to walk with you begin to recognize you. Conversations deepen quickly. Collaboration feels natural rather than negotiated. And this ease is not passivity, it is efficiency. Born from alignment, and efficiency preserves energy for what truly matters. And as energy is preserved, impact increases, and impact draws further provision, creating a cycle that is not self-generated, but sustained by obedience. And this cycle teaches you that alignment is not a one-time adjustment, but an ongoing posture, a way of being that continually calibrates intention, action, and response. And when this posture is maintained, the world continues to respond, not because you demand it to, but because order invites cooperation. And even opposition begins to serve purpose. Delays refine strategy. Resistance sharpens discernment. And nothing is wasted, because alignment redirects everything toward assignment. And this is why clarity accelerates alongside favor, because clarity ensures that what opens is entered wisely, that what is received is used effectively, and that what is entrusted is not mishandled. And as this becomes evident, you stop chasing validation, because confirmation is embedded in movement itself, the way things respond, the way doors open at the right moment rather than the earliest moment, the way provision meets need without excess or lack. And this balance is intentional, because overflow is not meant to inflate ego or create dependency. It is meant to empower service, to sustain vision, to support impact beyond yourself. And as you operate from this understanding, you handle increase differently. You move with humility. Even as authority grows, you remain teachable. Even as confidence solidifies, and this posture keeps alignment intact, allowing the outward response to continue unfolding without distortion. And eventually, you realize that what the world is responding to is not effort, charisma, or strategy, but coherence. The rare clarity that comes when inner life intention and obedience move as one. And this coherence creates trust. People trust your words, environments trust your presence, opportunities trust your stewardship. And this trust accelerates movement, because trust removes friction. And where friction is removed, progress flows. And this flow confirms that what has been aligned within you is now moving outward exactly as intended. Not ahead of time, not behind schedule, but in synchrony with purpose. And this synchronization produces peace even amid expansion, because you are no longer striving to keep up with what is happening. You are moving in step with it. And this is the true mark of alignment. Not constant activity, but responsive movement. Not noise, but effectiveness. And as you continue forward, you will recognize that every external shift is simply echoing an internal decision already made, a surrender already given, an alignment already established. And this echo is confirmation, not coincidence. A visible response to an invisible ordering that has taken place within you. And as long as that ordering is maintained, the response will continue. Environments will keep adjusting. People will keep responding. Doors will keep opening, and impact will keep expanding. Not because you demand it, but because alignment has given permission for purpose to move freely through you into the world.